Hello and happy Sunday.
Happy Sunday.
Welcome to the Two Matts Q&A episode brought to you by the New European. You ready to go, Matt?
Absolutely. So,
first question from Jonathan Haps. Should Labour include a preemptive rejection of a Sunak honours list in their manifesto? Also, should Labour finally set up a truly independent body to oversee and suggest honours, including the right to take them back if they fail to uphold the values of the institution they represent? What do you think?
Well, I don't think that they should reject Sunak's honours list, because I think that Sunak's honours list will be so deplorable that it will make the argument that we need to make.
It'll be a dishonour list.
Yes, and Starmer's already said he won't have one if he becomes Prime Minister, and I think that's good, and I hope that Sunak's is the last.
Yeah.
To the second part, it's a very good question about a truly independent body. The various committees that make recommendations would, of course, in Whitehall insist, strongly that they are, totally independent. But I think that, as in other areas, it's clear, isn't it, that the thing needs, if it's going to continue, needs to be hived off.
Yeah.
I would personally take it out of the hands of politicians entirely.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't like political honours. I've never agreed with this idea that it's entirely legitimate to, give a knighthood to someone who gives £1 million to the Tories.
Totally outrageous.
Or indeed, the peerages to people who lend money to the Labour Party. I just don't think that's how it should work.
I think I'd be tempted to abolish the whole bloody thing, to be honest.
Well, I mean, that might be where we're heading.
Yeah.
I don't know. But at the moment, the whole thing has been so horribly devalued. And I think I do feel sorry for people, and I know both your parents...
my grandparents, my dad's mum and dad were both honoured, yeah.
Yeah, and
but for proper stuff,
my dad had a CB, and
Yeah.
I don't like the way that they're now slung around.
No.
I
guess there's one like nobody. So the argument goes, nobody does what they do for an honour, and the honour is like a sort of nice affirmation of their value to society. So if you're not doing it for the honour, it doesn't matter if you don't get it, and if you are doing it for the honour, you definitely shouldn't get it. So let's just get rid of the honours.
I mean, I still think. I mean, there's part of me that thinks it's nice when people who've genuinely done something special are, given some sort of honour, or I don't know. But what I do know is the current system ain't working.
Yeah,
and we saw last week, and we mentioned it on the Friday podcast, Sunak giving Eric Schmidt, ex of Google guy, and Jamie Dimon, the world's sort of most successful banker, honours.
Services to self-enrichment.
Which is obviously job application stuff.
Yeah.
And it makes a mockery of the whole thing.
Yeah.
And so I'm very much in favour of what Jonathan suggests.
Thank you, Jonathan. Great question. Next question, please.
Do you think Nigel Farage will achieve his goal of becoming the leader of the right after the election, from Kay in Kensington? What do you reckon, Matt?
Well, I do. I mean, it obviously depends what you mean by the right.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
It's. I mean, I think he will play. If he gets elected, if he doesn't get elected, I think he'll bugger off to the States and we'll never see him again. Probably.
Yes, probably.
If he gets elected in Clacton, I think we're going to have 5 years of him lobbying and making a case and being a pain in the arse and being as divisive as one man can be about politics in this country. And I think he will aggregate around him a collection of ne'er-do-wells who are driven either by an ideological corruption or just a plain old corruption of wanting to be in power. And it's quite possible he could lead a revamped, I don't know whether it would be called the Conservative Party, but it would be a revamped force of the right that could one day be of consequence. I
mean, what worries me in this, and this may change by the time we post this podcast, but so far Boris Johnson has been the dog that hasn't barked on Farage's return.
Absolutely.
And what worries me a bit is, and this is pure speculation, I don't have any inside knowledge on it, but the logic of circumstance does seem to point in this direction, is that I don't think Boris Johnson will be able to keep away from this. And I know that he and Farage they've had an up and down relationship, but they obviously have had a lot of contact via Brexit and so on. And remember in 2019 when Farage was the leader of the Brexit party, and he stood down candidates in the 317 Tory-held seats. So, which helped Boris get a big majority. So they have had, moments of collaboration. And I do worry that Johnson comes back. I don't think he'd ever defect. So he's very, he's a lifelong Tory, considers the Tory party part of his sort of family inheritance, I think. And I do worry that they might do a more successful version of David Owen and David Steele.
Right.
I mean, can you imagine a Farage Johnson? I mean, the upside might be that they would just be like two scorpions in a jar.
Yeah.
The downside might be that their cumulative wattage would be huge. So I think, to Kay's question, there is if he gets into Parliament, he will be, just in terms of star power, already the leader of the right. Yeah,
we might well see defections before the election.
We might well. And, at the time of recording, Reform were only 2 points behind the Tories.
Incredible. Yeah.
So, which really is amazing when you think that Reform is just a company. It's not a party.
The biggest problem for people like us, speak for myself anyway, is that the more influence and the more Farage hangs on and gathers around him this influence, the less likely we are ever going to get any meaningful dialogue with the European Union about.
That's right.
Because we keep talking about, is Starmer brave enough to take us back to Europe? Blah 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 blah. Well, the unsaid other side of the coin is that Europe won't take us back until we are conclusively
bipartisan
and that. So if you've got Nigel Farage effectively driving the agenda of the Tory party, that is never going to happen until he is.
No, that's
we've got to work through that.
It's a brilliant point. I mean, because he will see it as his part of his historic destiny. I mean, first of all, to blame the failure of Brexit on everyone else.
Yeah.
And secondly, to ensure that reversing Brexit is totally impossible for the reasons you explained.
And you've got a brilliant cover story in this week's New European coming to the shops on Thursday on the poison of Nigel Farage and his playbook. So thank you for writing that.
Sadly, not to be underestimated.
Yeah. Thank you for your question, Kay. Next question, please.
Why are the opposition parties not talking honestly about Brexit when so many voters would support this?
From Penny Silver. Thank you. Well, Penny, the question of the moment, as far as I'm concerned, is this, which is, I mean, why aren't they talking about it? They're talking about it because, I mean, we spoke about this on Friday, didn't we, a little bit? They're scared of talking about it.
Yes.
And what is striking to me is how there seems to be this conspiracy between the two parties not to talk about it, almost like it's a kind of nudge, nudge, wink, wink. You don't mention it, I won't mention it, because neither of them are on comfortable ground. And yet it is to coin the cliche, the elephant in the room. If you look at Brexit as being the root cause of so many of the problems we've got in the economy, in society, in distrust of politics, everything focuses back to that day 8 years ago. And one way of addressing that is to talk about it, debate it, and to have it in the open. We seem to have adopted this, just after the Spanish Civil War, obviously Spain, after Franco died, they adopted this pact of silence.
Yes.
Whereas in South Africa, after apartheid, they had a truth and reconciliation program. Yeah. We need a truth and reconciliation program,
or at least a truth program, anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that you're right. I mean, they're both for it.
Yeah.
I mean, the Tories are for it because they know that they have their fingers all over the dead body.
Yeah.
Labour, I think that the political class in general is suffering from a not particularly sympathy-worthy PTSD over what happened between 2016, the referendum, and getting Brexit finally over the line after the 2019 election, which was a period of total mayhem.
Yeah.
And it was also a period when anyone who stepped remotely out of line was hammered by the Mail as, crush the saboteurs and the judges, enemy is the people. And so that's the part of it, which is we must not, there's a kind of excessive reverence for the referendum.
Yeah.
It was just a bloody referendum.
That's
We've had quite a lot of referendums.
We have, yeah.
You know, there was a referendum on the electoral reform system in Westminster in 2011, which no one remembers.
No one can even remember it. Yeah.
Or the North East Regional Assembly, or you know. So I think that the 2016 referendum has sort of been treated as almost like the Constitution. This is ridiculous. So whilst I understand why politicians are, you know, they didn't have a great time in those years. You know, they are public servants. Their job is to rise above that kind of
That's right.
reticence. And clearly, I mean, the problem with the reticence is that, you know, nothing really can be sorted until we grapple with this. Because the economy of this country, for a start, is not going to recover until we get access to the single market.
Yeah.
So, you know, the longer this kind of conspiracy of silence goes on, the worse it will be for everyone.
Shouldn't we have a public inquiry into the referendum and Brexit and just get everybody up there in the same way that we've
I wouldn't bother with the referendum. I would just do a if I was Starmer coming in, I would do an audit, get the OBR to do it. I mean, they have done it really, on what, you know, list the Brexit dividend.
Yeah.
It'll be a very short document. It'd be a tweet, really, wouldn't it?
We once did, on the 6th anniversary, we did a front page with the headline, those Brexit dividends in full, and it was, the rest of the page was entirely blank.
It is actually
true.
It's funny, but it is actually true. Just playing straw man or steel man. What are the Brexit dividends?
Did you see, by the way, the other day it must have been Wednesday or Thursday, the D-Day commemorations, they had paratroopers parachuting into France, and they had to be processed by French customs. They had to bring their passports with them.
So, I mean, so unbelievably
Honestly,
embarrassing. It's
honestly.
embarrassing. I mean, that's another thing about it is that, you know, a nation's role in the world does, to a certain extent, depend on it not being ridiculous.
That's right.
And Brexit is ridiculous.
We grew up laughing at Italy, didn't we?
And
Italian politics.
We are becoming a funny country.
Yeah, Italian kids grow up today laughing about us.
We are. We're not the sick man of Europe. Well, we are in some respects, but we're also the funny man of it.
Yeah, the clowns.
You don't want to be the clown nation.
Penny, thank you for provoking our higher blood pressure. Next question, please.
I am seeing more journalists write stories where they are the main protagonist. When did this become a thing? And do you subscribe to the Malcolm Tucker line of "I'm not a story here"? Charles Saunders, a new subscriber. Thanks, Charles.
So well, I mean, kind of gonzo journalism has been a thing ever since Hunter S. Thompson, I guess, and Norman Mailer, hasn't it?
And Tom Wolfe and Joan Didion and all that stuff. And I think, and I'm, you know, guilty. I'm part of this, you know, that because much of what I do is commentary. Opinion pieces often will, by definition, include the word "I."
Yeah.
But that said, I mean, I remember one of the first things I was taught as a reporter was always get out the way of the story.
Yeah.
And I think certainly when you're talking about reporting, and analysis, it shouldn't be about you at all.
Was it C.P. Scott who said facts are sacred and comment is free?
Yes.
And that's true. The line has become really blurred, hasn't it?
Yes. And I think that social media has infected mainstream media with the sort of egocentricity and narcissism.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you know, journalists are really no more interesting than anyone else.
No.
And the idea that, you know, all those pieces, and we're looking at you, Daily Mail, I'm afraid, again, you know, why I, as a, you know, am doing this, you know, why Ozempic did not help me, you know, improve my A-levels or whatever. I mean, it's so much of it is, it's personal, it's great, you know, people can relate to it. Well, I don't think the main point of journalism is relatability. You know, I really don't. You know, it's not therapy.
Yeah. Are we doing this? Are we doing it here right now in real time? Are we doing a version of that?
It depends what you think podcasting is. I mean, I think I see podcasting as an adjunct to journalism rather than, you know, a replacement for it.
Yeah.
So look.
But a lot of people, Matt, would listen to Joe Rogan. A lot of young people,
yes, well,
they'd listen to Joe Rogan talking, and they'd take away from that Joe Rogan's opinions as fact.
This is where we are entering a new world, which is that the fact is that Joe Rogan is the most influential media figure in the world.
Yes.
With the possible exception of Elon Musk.
Yes.
And his extremely successful and often very funny podcast is entirely composed of unchecked facts and the word "I" and that's it. And people do get their news from that. And let us not at all underestimate TikTok. I mean, I was really interested when Trump joined TikTok. He's now got 5 million followers within days, and his first post got 80 million views.
Jeez. And
it's just of him being cheered by the crowd at the UFC.
Amazing.
But the point about that is that it is the case that a huge number of people now are getting their news from YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, and so on.
And it's getting compounded, by the way, which with the emerging business models of journalism, which is subscription for old legacy titles, new titles like ours. We're dependent upon subscription.
Yeah.
But a lot of people don't want to pay for their news, so they'll get it where it's free, which can be TikTok, Twitter, wherever.
And I mean, the BBC is facing a very, very big crunch moment soon, because the assumption that they're operating on is that since people don't really have televisions anymore, they have screens and they have devices. But, the idea that you can link a kind of compulsory levy to the ownership of a television is very analog. Yeah. What's their funding model going to be? And I think selling to the young who all get their news either free or cough up a $5 for Netflix every month or whatever it is, the idea of anything other than a subscription model, not to speak of a compulsory levy, 150 a tax, is going to be very hard. I mean, I hope it does, because I think BBC's great. But
interesting. Thank you, Charles.
Question.
Yeah, very good question. We are not the story here, I don't think. Are we?
No, and we shall not speak of one another.
Next question, please. From Michael Rosenthal. Is there any justification for the media supplying Farage? And I should explain that Michael has spelt Farage as Farridge.
It's the composition of Farage and porridge,
because there is James O'Brien refuses to call him Farage, does he? He calls him Farage.
Farage.
Which is like, it's very funny. Different emphasis, isn't it? With Farage. Let me start this again. Is there any justification for the media supplying Farage with so much of the oxygen of publicity? He's a racist who's achieved nothing, and whose endorsement of the convicted felon Trump should have left him entirely ostracised. So, is there any justification?
Yes. And here's the problem: is it's a very seductive argument, and I understand where it's coming from, and I salute you, Michael. Yeah. And it goes back, actually. I mean, the kind of the classic example of it was Thatcher saying that we shouldn't give the oxygen of publicity to the IRA.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Which was, and a lot of people said, yes, if we stop reporting, the bombs, or what Jerry Adams or Martin McGuinness was saying, and indeed there was a broadcasting ban on what they were saying, they'll go away. Which they did not. Yeah. And I understand that argument, but I think it's wrong, because I think our job is just to report the news, and B, I think it's a dangerous road to go down, because who gets to decide who is deprived of coverage? Yeah. Like it or not, and I think we've established that we don't like it, but Nigel Farage is a very important figure.
Yeah.
And we can argue at the margins that he shouldn't have been on Question Time so often or something like that. But it would be idle to deny that what he did on Monday by saying he was going to run in Clacton was news, and big news, and it has, and to pretend that by sort of sticking our fingers in our ears, that we would make that go away it's
It's
both
futile, isn't it?
well, I think it's breaking the journalistic covenant, actually.
Yeah.
And it also, this is happened a lot in America when the social media groups try to deplatform lots and lots of people. It just goes underground and gets nastier. You know, there's absolutely no doubt that the right-wing militias in America were fed by that.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying anything goes. I'm not saying it's our job to report what any racist or two-bit Nazi on Whitehall says. But, you know, the fact that he endorsed Trump, well, I'm afraid, if you look at the polls since the conviction, they're not really moving.
Well,
you know,
I agree with you, and I'd like to this phrase, the oxygen of publicity.
Yes.
Well, I would like to deprive him of the oxygen of publicity, but I'd like to feed him the carbon monoxide of publicity.
Exactly.
And I think, you know, let's accept that he will have some publicity, but let's just be completely straight about disabusing anybody of the notion that he's anything other than a liar, a manipulator, a corrosive influence in our lives, and keep hammering that message home.
That's the point, isn't it? Is that if the job of the grown-ups in this new media ecosphere in which we're all trying to work out where we are is to scrutinize what the algorithm won't.
Yes.
You know, it's TikTok and YouTube, and you know they won't say this is good and this is bad. They'll say you like this, have more of it.
Yeah.
So interestingly, Reform UK has been doing incredibly well on Facebook. I don't know why that's the particular platform, but it is.
Yeah.
You know, I was looking it up this morning, and Farage has more followers on X than Starmer.
Is that right?
He's got 1.8 million followers,
I'm not surprised,
exactly. And
Yeah.
Starmer has 1.4 million followers.
Yeah.
Now, which all of that, leave that aside. There's nothing we can do about that.
Yeah.
But to your point, what we can do is report on Farage and then explain what he means.
Yeah.
And what is he saying?
Yeah.
You know,
and hope that people, all you can do is do
you
what you said, and then hope that people are listening.
You can only hope people are listening.
And thinking as well.
That's it. But I really don't think that pretending Farage and Trump don't exist is going to stop them existing.
No, I think that's true. Michael, thank you for your question. Much appreciated. Next question, please. I don't often read the Daily Mail. Great intro. I don't often read the Daily Mail, but this week I did, and learned about the time slip phenomenon, whereby the Mail's readers claim to have experienced involuntary time travel backwards. Have either of the Matts had such experiences? Bez 24 in Southwark.
Well, where to begin? I wasn't aware of this, but had a look.
Is this true?
Yes, there's a piece on Mail Online running this last week about
Back
how
to where, the 1950s?
Well, apparently it differs. You see, apparently depending on where you are, and what happens is you're walking down. You know, you're walking down Oxford Street, and suddenly you see a horse and carriage, or you know, you're at the O2 Arena, and suddenly it's a desolate landscape.
Really?
You know,
Really?
well, no, I mean, I think that some of this might be what they call a lie of sorts, but I thought it was, and what I love about this is that. I mean, basically, the Daily Mail is a time slip phenomenon itself, isn't it?
That's
the point. Is that
yeah.
you know, when you open the Mail, you're suddenly being invited by Paul Dacre, you know, to imagine how much better things were when everyone had rickets and, you know, bad food and it wasn't great, you know, and maybe before the NHS turned us all into communists.
It's like that great Bette Midler quote, you know, the one which says, when it's midnight in New York, it's 1953 in London, you know. It's like...
No, but I also, it's one of the things that about Mail World that I find very funny is that a lot of their ire is, you know, aimed at what they consider to be, you know, newfangled changes and weird youngsters doing terrible, woken, silly things. But they are also themselves, and you know, incredibly superstitious.
Yes.
And incredibly amenable to bonkers UFO theories and Yetis and time slip phenomena. So I don't know about you. I mean, I can
no,
only
it's
see,
true.
I have never myself.
No, I've never. I don't remember experiencing.
But it's early days. I mean, who
yeah.
knows? I may walk out of this podcast studio and find myself in Elizabethan England
I
momentarily.
bet most of the country wishes they could time slip backwards to the day before July the 23rd, 2016.
It would be quite handy, wouldn't it, in a kind of Doctor Who way, if we could just, TARDIS our way back to. Yeah. But I don't think we can.
No.
But I really like the fact that in the midst of all the poison about this, and they have these pieces which say, a lot of our readers have found themselves. It's
true.
The word involuntary is what makes me laugh.
Involuntary is great. But it's true. The Mail was I think I'm right in saying the Mail was the last of the nationals to really keep astrology as a big kind of core thing.
Yes,
they paid a fortune. I think I'm right in saying for the late Jonathan Caner.
That's right.
From the day, I mean, millions.
Yes,
Jonathan Caner to jump ship from the. To tell you what I mean, most people probably don't know their star signs these days, but it's weird, isn't it? 25 years ago, people were obsessed with it. But
it does make me laugh because if a 25-year-old has an aromatherapy candle, the Mail will accuse them of being subversives and destroying the Western civilization. But they will happily plaster this idea of involuntary time travel across their website, which is.
It reminds me. Do you know the great anecdote of what the editor whose name I won't mention because we don't like him on Merseyside, but he did write a very funny letter to the astrologer of the Sun, and it was to sack him. And the letter started, as you will no doubt already know.
It is a great line. It really is.
Right, Bez24 from Southwark. Thank you so much. We're done for now.
We're done for now.
So thank you all for your questions. Sorry if we didn't answer your question. We've had a huge mailbag. Do keep writing in though to 2matts@tnepublishing.com. That's the number 2 MATTS at tnepublishing.com. Or if you're listening on Spotify, you can message us there very simply. Please don't forget your subscription to the New European. Support great independent journalism, get closer to Europe, do your bit about fighting the corrosive nationalism of the UK mainstream nonsense, and you'll love it if you love this podcast. So go to theneweuropean.co.uk/2mats. There's a link in the show notes. Thanks as ever to our team at Rethink Audio, led by Matt Hill, and join us on Monday afternoon/evening for the second
election podcast.
For our election podcast.
Can
you take it? We'll see you then.
Meanwhile, enjoy Sunday.
Have a great Sunday.